So here we are in Republic of Rome, and here's one of the biggest effects, good or bad, of my little optional aging roll. We had a huge die-off. Usually this happens once, right? 6 turns after the first turn. But we had a perhaps an even larger one this time, where a number of factions lost old men. Some of them had multiple people at an old age and had to actually discard someone. So here we're going to see 2 more go into here. In some ways this is important, maybe not having this kind of effect, but the overall removing senatorial families, because you never get the senatorial families back otherwise, almost. And also the number of dead as the game goes on, as a proportion of the population goes down. Now this makes it go up, there's no question. But what I'm saying is the one mortality chit per turn, it doesn't really cover the growth of the population of the senatorial families. However, this obviously wipes out numbers way in excess of whatever you'd see in an actual game. I think it's kind of nice, especially solitaire, because it makes the factions more manageable. When they get too big and when there's just too many cards on the table, I have trouble handling the whole thing. Playing it opposed, it's not such a big deal. We also see a lot of concessions got thrown out. Interesting. All right, well, I'll collect my income and see what happens. Okay, so just got through the forum phase. And, oh, got my rolls to do. Yes. Oh, yet another concession is going to be available. Tons of concessions, offices that are vacant, provinces. Germanic migrations happened. Because that's a war, it triggered the Pretender emerged in Cisalpine Gaul. There's another war. But Germanic migrations, among other things, created a new province. At this point, the Romans have a new alliance. They can, if they wish, and they probably will, discard a war, and it makes no sense to discard the province, in order to get, and they get half the treasury out of it, and they don't have to fight it. Do they want to do that, or do they want to kill this pair of wars? I mean, there's no real reason they can't handle 2 wars right now. So they may choose not to actually do it. It doesn't seem reasonable to me to leave wars out there. All right. And politically, well, everything's all shooken up. And there's a lot to be done on this turn, because there's all these provinces, all these concessions. Basically, this is the kind of situation where one big coalition is going to happen. And it may be larger than it need be. It may in fact be everyone agreeing to avoid the play of tribunes, etc. But we'll see. Well, unlike what usually happens when I try to do this, and we didn't see that huge deal form. Instead, what we saw was a fairly small, very dedicated one. The guy who had the Rome Council and just enough votes said, let's just drive half the other players out of the game for a while. And they did this by divvying up the positions. Field Council and Censor over here, Rome Council here. Pontifex Maximus, which is probably the big win out of the whole for a guy who has no age markers, just in terms of how much money that's going to produce. But he has a disadvantage because he's losing Scipio, who's, his major character here. And he still doesn't have a tribune and can't try to force a vote. A tribune was played. It was held for that huge pile of concessions, which was again allocated all at once. And shot down, and that can be expected. But everyone else was sent off to a governor position. Every single other person, with one exception. Sulpicius doesn't have a position left. They're saving Cisalpine Gaul for him. But yeah, I mean, there's 2 votes outside this coalition. It's right now a 3-player game. As people come back from their governorships, and we'll see a couple from this faction coming back, it becomes not just a 3-player game anymore. But it definitely knocked a few players out for a little while. Engaging the wars. We're sending the Field Council after Cisalpine Gaul, and we're sending good old Fabius, the Roman Council, after the Germanic migrations. I don't expect any great difficulty with either of these. The entire Roman army is committed, but we'll see. Well, the wars were successful. Acilius lost 1 legion. He had slightly less of an advantage than I thought he did. But good old Fabius had so many troops of Rome's army that he decided, although he had no money, he decided to test his luck. He decided to let them go back to Rome. He didn't spend anything. However, remember what happened to the last guy that had this happen to him. He got a lot of backlash. So just testing the loyalty has shown in this group to be kind of a problem. I also kind of cheated, I'm not sure, because my rules are kind of weird here. But because Scipio is dying, I allowed them to play Sulla, who's from the same family, discarding Scipio just a few segments, 1 segment ahead of time. Otherwise, I'd have to wait a whole turn, hold a handful of cards, weaken. It didn't seem reasonable, but that's the kind of fudging that I have to do. Entering into the Senate phase, and Rome's really not facing anything. Possible internal disruption due to the senators squabbling, but beyond that, all that came up is allied enthusiasm, a lot of events actually, allied enthusiasm, manpower shortage, and some barbarian raids. Question, of course, is do we want to dispatch legions to try to handle some of those raids? And we'll see, who gets favored and who doesn't in the Senate. But beyond that, I don't see much of anything happening here. Finances are terrific, and this is one of the situations that comes to the game is it kind of settles into a position where it's no longer really in danger anymore. Except, of course, the fact that you do have to send fairly large armies to handle a few of these wars still. And then there's the danger that the guy who you sent comes back and says, hey, I want to own this country. Payback's a bitch. So, this guy came back with 2 very good leaders. Now, Cato's going to die very soon, and Glauca's not that much younger, but it gave him a load of points. He was able to make an alliance with the other guy who got shafted last turn, and our notorious backstabber here. Now, the agreement split the consul between the 2 people who got most hurt, and basically didn't take revenge on him. That was the largest part, but it also handed out a couple of the concessions. And see, all the concessions got out. They were handed in 2 batches this time, and enough tribunes had been used that nobody really smashed in. And even somebody who wasn't voting for this got included into there. However, one of the tribunes was used to prevent Cato, I believe, from becoming censor. And it ended up, this is one of the tricks of the game. Okay, if you have one person you want to be something, and you have enough votes, you suggest to everyone else and make them fail. Of course, somebody could throw a lot of money into one of your suggestions and make it pass, but it wasn't worth it over this. So the censor ended up going the one place that it was safe, because let's say, so here's the situation. There were a couple of people who would have been pushed over that 21-point limit. Let's say Acilius was picked next as the second best choice from anyone's point of view. Well, if that happened, then, and he was vetoed, then it's forced to be on a bad choice, somebody who'd push the victory over. You can't recall people for that easily. So this is, we managed to hand out all the stuff. We've got the barbarian raids coming. The people from last turn who were on top, one's at 0, the other one's at 2 votes. They got sent away to some of these provinces. Now he's not in any danger, but these guys are both in provinces that could get them killed. And went through the red cards, nothing too exciting there. One person played a law. Servilian law, actually this was played during the Senate phase. Servilian law, he gets a +1 to all future night attraction die rolls. Now, if he openly discards this, once a certain law, the Acilian law, is in effect, he can cancel that law. But right now, he's got this bonus towards attracting knights, which is cool. They give you profit and they give you votes. All right, well, we're not seeing a lot to move the game along in this turn. I mean, the deck keeps moving, but no real activity happening. I'm going to load this one up because we're getting close to the amount of time I like to use.